Welcome to the Uncredible Podcast. My name's Jeremy, and I'm Uncredible. And I'm going with a hat again this week, just because I got out of work like 4:30 is when I got home in the morning. Sent the kids off to school, and decided to throw the hat on. And I chose this hat. I actually used it on my run yesterday, because I found out that I think it was April 30th, begins like some kind of a centennial celebration of Route 66. And I hadn't worn this hat in a while. I think I might have worn it one other time recently, but I kind of have it I have a bunch of hats hanging up on the wall, and every once in a while I'll throw one on. Usually I go with the Krispy Kreme or the Uncredible hat, but this one pulled off the shelf. I bought this hat, I don't know, must have been 2 years ago. I'm trying to remember how long it's been. My dad and I had to drive my aunt from Phoenix, Arizona to New York, where I live. And basically we flew out there, and I think we got there probably around, it's hard to remember the time. In fact, if I actually saved all the timestamps of what we did, because it was pretty amazing. My dad was a third shifter as well. And so we flew out there. We left New York on Eastern time in the evening, like 6. Yeah, it's hard to remember because it was weird. It's like when we got there, between all the flights, it was late. It was like I know we had dinner, so it couldn't have been but 10 o'clock or something like that. But anyway, long story short, we had to load up the trailer for my aunt, and we were driving her car, Nissan Rogue. We were driving back because we figured the math on it. If we loaded up a U-Haul trailer and just drove the thing in a couple of days, ended up being 4 days, I think. 3 nights, 4 days. We drove from Phoenix to just south of Buffalo, New York, where I'm from. And we, being night shifters, we got there at night, and I remember we loaded the trailer, got everything going, and my dad was like, you know what? Maybe we should just call it. It's late. I think we were leaving. I want to say we got on the road around 3 a.m. And I was like, that's not what I came here to do. When I get on my night shift mode and I set out to do something, it's game time. I said, if you want to sleep, fine. But our goal was to get out of Arizona, and there was a lot of hills that we had to get up and over. And I wanted to get as far as we could out of Arizona before the next day started, because I really felt like that was key for us getting through this trip rather quickly. And I knew for a fact, just knowing my own personal how I interact with the world, I knew staying up all night wasn't going to slow me down. And I knew when the sun came up, I would have energy. So we did. By 8 a.m, I think we left their house at 3 a.m, Arizona time, whatever that is. And we were at some Cracker Barrel, I think, in New Mexico by like 8 a.m. the next. I'd have to look. I have a whole thing. But then from there we drove. We did 12-hour days driving. We switched roughly every 4 hours or 300 miles. But that trip we drove, a lot of it was on Route 66 or new Route 66 or right next to Route 66. And we were going through a lot of the states connected to Route 66, and I bought this hat at one of the gas stations. So kind of a cool memory. 4-day trip with my dad. Kind of a trip that I'm going to be talking about ultra marathons later, but it was like a driving ultra marathon. Like you drove every day, all day. Your aid stations were the gas stations. The only difference was you weren't running. So it's probably more work for the car than for us. But in terms of like sleep and things like that, it was similar in that case, where you got to keep going. Yeah. So this week on the Substack, actually next week on the Substack, we're going to talk about those 2 articles. But I noticed last week when I recorded the podcast, I go off on tangents sometimes. Like a lot of times when I'm thinking about something and then I hear myself say a word or a phrase, I kind of want to chase that and I get off track. And I started last week talking about the Uncredible readings that we have on Spotify, where the articles are read, like 7 to 10 minute articles. In fact, one of them this week was like 4 minutes, I think. I got to talking about the readings, and I forgot to push this week's throwback article, which I think's funny. I kind of wrote it as a somewhat sarcastic, comedic article, but also somewhat serious, where I talk about how I feel like I'm in a simulation sometimes. And it's a fun little article, but that was the throwback article for this week. That's already online. Looking ahead to next week on uncredible.me, the new article is going to be Group Projects Reward Lazy People. And what inspired this article was a couple of weeks ago, my daughter was really stressing over a group project. She's young. She's in 6th grade and been assigned a group project, and she was doing all this work for it. And it just brought back memories for me of doing group projects in school and just hating every step of the process. And in this article, I talk about how group projects really do seem to benefit lazy people or people who don't know how to do the work or don't want to do the work, because the overachievers and the people who are capable always, because they care about their grade, they always step up and carry the group, and the group rides on someone's coattails. And so I understand the desire of schools to teach people to collaborate, but man, the process for somebody who is trying for a good grade just feels, it's so frustrating. And I share a story in there about a group project I did when I was studying for my master's degree. My master's degree I did online, and then we were assigned a group project. So it was a group project online. And I thought, this is the silliest thing. I mean, at least a group project in an in-person class, you can sit across from people and talk things out. You're going to do this, I'm going to do this. I guess technically you could do that with an online course, especially today. But when I was going through school, it was like these like message boards, and you kind of collaborated. But like when you completed something, you had to email it to everyone, and then everyone critiqued it, and then everybody came back with, oh, such a mess. But the group project, the class ended up having a weird number of people, where I think everyone was there's supposed to be 3 people in a group. And the professor said, unless there's one person who wants to do this project alone, we're going to need to have somebody volunteer to do it alone, or I'm going to have to assign a group of 4. And I was like, sign me up. Like, I'm your guy for doing it alone. And it was funny because I enjoyed the whole process. I think I went to religious school. I was studying to be a pastor, and I think the assignment was something to do with writing a modern article, like a newspaper, like a 4-page newspaper about a character in the Bible. And I can't remember if it was a specific character or a specific book, but the idea was to get creative with the content. So I really loved it. I did the whole thing. It was fun. What stood out to me, though, was I really didn't feel like I put a whole lot of effort into the individual group project. And I got a great grade, and I got props for doing all the work myself. And I just thought, this was not that hard. It was not difficult at all. And then you had other people in the group who were like, oh, we really struggled, or this part was hard. And I was just like, man, I'm so glad that I just did this alone. Group projects have always been a challenge for me, whether I don't get along with people or I just like doing things myself. Whatever that is in me, it's a problem. But I saw my daughter struggling with it in the same way that I used to, and I was just like, man, I hate group projects. They suck, man. Really. So I wrote this article. That'll come out next Wednesday. I try for 9 o'clock. Doesn't always work out that way, but that's what I try for. And then next Thursday, the throwback article is using AI doesn't make you less of a writer. Now, a lot of these articles that are throwback articles were from my time when I was on medium.com. So I'm transferring a lot of those articles over to Substack just so that I have everything in one place. And this article, when I wrote it, was very interesting because on medium.com, there's sort of this like, at the time, I don't know if it's still that way, there was sort of like this, there was a group of people who were using AI to edit. There was a subset of people who were using AI to just create the whole article. Some people were using AI to brainstorm. And then there were like hardline, don't use AI for anything. And I'll be honest, if it wasn't for ChatGPT, I might not have gotten back into writing articles. And the reason I say that is because one of the most tedious things for me, because I'm a very like detail-oriented person, when I put a story on paper, it sounds to me like when I read it in my own voice in my own head, like it's well written. But I have a hard time editing it so that it reads that way to other people. And so where I use artificial intelligence or ChatGPT is I write the article and then I feed the article to ChatGPT and say, hey, see if I got any like glaring spelling errors, grammatical errors, sentence structure, things like that. And I'll be honest, sometimes ChatGPT goes way too far. You know what I've noticed is it gets really choppy sometimes when it thinks it's writing for people who are quick readers. And I'm like, that's not what I'm going for. And I actually, when I was on medium.com, I had this weird experience where the one time that I didn't, so I wrote another article similar to this about using AI and encouraging people to use it. And when I decided, well, it would be kind of disingenuous for me to run that through AI after writing an article about using AI. I want to make sure this is true to me. And medium.com has these like individuals who run publications. So it's sort of like this like faux publication thing within the environment of medium.com. And the person running the publication that I submitted it to flagged it for AI. And I had to chuckle because it's like the one article that I didn't use it was calling out. And one of the things that I started to notice about people who were criticizing articles written by AI, they were criticizing the fact that people were using large words or long sentences. And I'm like, that is exactly how I was trained to write, like professionally trained to write. And I remember putting that in a comment and people were like, ha ha ha, I went to college, listen to this guy. And I'm like, dude, it's not like I'm 90. I went to college like 15 years ago. It's like, it's not like I'm super old, like going to the card catalog and dusting off the books and from the library. This was like how you wrote. At the time when I was writing for Medium, it was like maybe a decade ago that I was doing that. Like that I was writing papers, required to write papers this way. So it's like, and I'm dumbing it down. So like if what I'm writing is too much for you, like college in my day would have destroyed you. It's like, but the point is, what AI was filtering was what would be considered professional or decent writing at the collegiate level in 2015. And I thought that was interesting because when you think about what AI does, what open source AI does, is it scans the internet for a palette or a template or a flavor of something, and then you put your prompts in, and it takes the collective group of these things and makes an assumption based on that data. And the problem is the internet being that source or that pool. If you were to say what percentage of articles online are like well-written publication level articles, it's not that many. It's going to be like 10 to 90. Like 90% is just fluff and clickbait, and the other 10% might be anywhere from like low-level educational all the way up to like, professional writing. I'm sure there's stuff. I know there's Substacks out there that are like just crazy in-depth researched papers, but AI is going to look at that and go, I type into AI, make the article I just wrote perfect for Substack. Well, AI kicks out, just recently, I had an article where I wrote like 3 to 5 sentences per paragraph, fed it into ChatGPT. The article gets spit back out and it was like one line, one line, one line. And I'm like, just even visually, I was like, this looks really choppy. And I have because I do the Uncredible readings on Spotify, I'm looking at that going, that is not going to sound like me when I read it. Like, it still has to be my voice. So I had ChatGPT like back it down a little bit. Like, you don't need to change my words and all that. And I've also noticed that there's times when I write an article and it'll try to like it'll try to like turn my point into something that's more, I'm not sure how to say it, but like more culturally accepted, or say it in a way that like somebody else in the culture would say it. And I'm like, dude, the reason I wrote it that way is because it's not that. So sometimes you got to really go back through and be like, hey, like you're going back. Now, what I will say about ChatGPT is over time, it does really start to capture what you're going for. So you'll have these moments where you're like, that is not what I'm going for. Is this what you're going for? No. And then you get to this like sweet spot where you're like, hey, now you're getting it. And then you'll have a run of articles where it just, edits it cleanly, keeps it punchy for you, and maybe puts a little flair in there, whatever. The other reason I use AI in my writing, and one of the things that drew me back in, was I always liked to have an image to draw people's attention. I love that. And when I wrote before, or when I did podcasting before, I was always scouring the internet for royalty-free images that I could use. Now with ChatGPT, open source, you can just kind of prompt it. I got to be honest, it's pretty good at cranking out almost exactly what you're looking for. Again, you kind of have to dial it in because sometimes it'll go a little wonky on you, but generally speaking, if you write the article and feed it into ChatGPT, it has an idea of what you're trying to do right there. And then you have it build the article based on your taste and what your expectation is for the article, or like the feel you're going for, and it spits it out. And I use it for the thumbnails for the YouTube video and the Spotify video for the podcast, but I also use it for all the Substack header images. And what it does is it allows me as a writer to just get this story that's in my head onto the computer without worrying about, what image would I put with that? Or typing it out, and then it's like, oh, I can't really find the right words to get my point across. And one thing I've noticed is I'll tend to say the same thing over and over, and it'll clean that up. And so I'll say it 3 different ways, and it's like, bro, we get it. So, so next week on the Substack at uncredible.me, group projects reward the lazy people, and throwback article will be using AI doesn't make you less of a writer. All right, now let's shift gears and get into our weekly update. We are into week 17 of marathon training, and normally I start off with talking about the previous Saturday when I ran my long run, but I kind of decided last week that because of the soreness and the injury I've been dealing with, I say injury, but I think soreness is probably the better word. It's definitely overuse related, and it's somewhere shin splints, calf, right hip. It's in there, and every once in a while, inner thigh, adductor. So it's kind of like I have residual pain different days depending on how the day goes, and I can't really place it. And so last Saturday, I was kind of in that place where I was like, it's still sore. Like, I still have pain. Is it a good idea to run a long run? And I kind of decided it wasn't. And so I did 1 mile and just kind of decided I wasn't going to do a long run at all. But I felt so good Sunday after taking that, just giving my body that extra day of break, I guess, that I went out on Sunday and I decided to up my mileage. And normally on Sundays, Sunday's usually one of my lightest days, but I decided to go ahead and put in a long run. And it's funny. The more you do this running thing, it's funny how your perception of like a 3-mile run becomes kind of like absurd. And what I mean by that is it's like mentally it's like, oh, what's the point if I'm going to go out and just do 3 miles? Or what's the point if I'm just going to do 1 mile? And inevitably, if I'm mentally in that space where I'm going to run 3 miles or 1 mile, I end up running way too fast. It's like hard for me to go slow on a short run. So I decided I was going to make Sunday sort of like a long run attempt, but I knew I wasn't going to go for 10. So I have a path that gets me to around 7 or 8 miles, depending on how I take it. And I ran that route, got 7.25 miles, and the run itself was mostly pain-free. I think I had a little bit of pain to start off. And one thing I've noticed about runs where you're worried about pain is that pain will be there. And it's almost like it's mental, right? It's sort of like it's warning you it's there, but it's not. I don't know how to explain it. But like when I started this run, my shin was like twinging, but it was like, let's see if that goes away. And then by mile 2, I felt fine. So, and this route, the first 2 miles are the hardest because it's sort of an uphill grade, and then you get into some downhills and some flats. So it's those first 2 miles are probably the worst part of it. And I'm like, if I get through this, I should be okay. And like I said, it was mostly pain-free on Sunday, but man, when everything relaxed, it was rough. It was, I realized what a good idea it was on that Saturday, the day before, not to run that, because I'm not sure if I would have set myself back, because the soreness I had after this Sunday run, which was just 7.5 miles, 7.25, I was like, whoa. So I went to work, had pain, and then started this week of just no sleep. Like just a terrible, terrible week of sleep. Now, Sunday I did my normal thing where I go to bed, probably got to bed around 2. It's hard to say, but I probably got to bed around 2 o'clock and had my normal 5-6 hours of sleep on a Sunday, and then worked all night, came home the next day. And I have in my notes that this is truck day because we had scheduled to purchase this truck. My son had scheduled to purchase this truck. And so my goal on Monday was we're not getting any sleep on Monday. So we're going to run 1 mile, did 1 easy mile, no problem, felt fine. And then we're going to go meet this couple, buy their truck. We had to go to the bank to get his money. There's a lot of stuff that was involved with it. But at the end of the line was going to the DMV and getting it registered. So by 11 o'clock, everything was rolling pretty smooth. And I was like, we might be able to get this all done in a day. So we get the insurance set up, and the insurance is dated for Tuesday. And if you live in New York State, I don't know how this is else in other places, but all your documents have to be spot on. And so if I go to the DMV in New York State and my insurance card says that the start of the term is tomorrow, like for the next 6 months, they won't insure the vehicle because technically it's not for today. So knowing that, I get on, they have this chat feature, and I got an actual person. So I wasn't just like talking to nobody or AI or a bot. And I said, is there any way we can get this dated for today? Because I was really hoping to get this done today. They're just like, no, there's no way to do same day insurance in New York through Geico. So I was like, all right, fine. And at that point, it's noon, but it's been a stressful day. I got my 1 mile in. I was like, told my son, we'll go tomorrow morning, first thing in the morning. We'll hit the DMV, we'll get it done, and I'll do 2 days of easy running, and then hopefully we'll get it straightened out. So I only got 5 hours of sleep on Monday. Tuesday morning, my thought was if we get to the DMV first, they open at 8:30. If we get there first, we can get in, get out, car will be registered, He'll have the whole day to tinker with the truck. And then I can sleep, run a couple extra miles, depending on how it goes. So we get to the DMV 30 minutes early, in line first, get to the line, and then everything just starts to go wrong with this truck. And a lot of it's my fault. Some of it, I think, was the lady at the DMV was being a little particular about some stuff. So the big thing was the title was old. Like, it was a super old title. My son bought I'll share a picture of it somewhere in here, but my son bought a 2004 Ford F-150. It's a little rough, but that's what he wanted, something that he could work on, keep going. And it's his first vehicle that he bought with his own money, $1,600. It's kind of a beater, but he's loving it. So with it being a 2004, the idea, and single owner, they've owned it the whole time. The idea of it having a lien against it didn't even cross my mind. But sure enough, the title had a lien listed on it. And the lady at the DMV said it was active. And I'm going, how is this 2004? Now, there is a world where that's possible, but this thing had been titled in New York State. They hadn't changed the title, and it had the lien against it, supposedly, or listed on there. And it's a 2004. The title was super old. I mean, to give you an idea, one of the reasons we went with this truck is, even though it was a 2004, it's only got 111,000 miles, which is really great for a car that old, or a truck that old. And the title, I think, only had like 25,000 miles on it at the time. So I'm like, there's no way that this car didn't get paid off or repoed. Like, there's just no way. So my heart sinks. We get booted out of the DMV. So now it's not getting registered. And I start frantically, because I'm frustrated. I start texting the lady who sold the car to us, or the gentleman. The wife was the one who was primarily involved with it, and she was the detail. The wife was the detail oriented one. It was the husband's truck, but she was the detailed one, and she immediately was like, "There's no lien on that truck. Are you kidding me?" And she says she'll leave work. She'll go see if she can find paperwork for lien release and all that. And so we're just kind of sitting for a while, for about 45 minutes. And then she calls me and she says, "I found some paperwork. I'll give it to you. You can have all of it. Hopefully that'll clear the lien." So I meet up with her. The paperwork's valid. All's good. She doesn't need copies of it because we have the truck now. And she's good with that. So we go back to the DMV at like 10:30 in the afternoon. Now keep in mind, I work nights, so I have to get to bed in order to go to work later that day. So, and the day before, I only got like 5.5 hours of sleep. So we get through, surprisingly, we get through the DMV and we get it registered. He's good to go, but it's like, once again, it's like 12. No, actually, we got done with the DMV pretty quick. It was like 11:30. And I told my dad we would meet up with him to show him the truck once it was registered. So we did that. Didn't get to bed till like 2 or 3 again, and 5 hours of sleep again. So I'm cooked. And so I ran 1 mile Monday, 1 mile Tuesday. Wednesday, I am probably one of the most exhausted runs I've had in a long time. I was tired, but I was like, I don't want to settle for 1 mile today. I want to get some mileage in today. So I ran 3.1 miles and actually felt really good with this run. My pace was like 8:47, knocked it out, got to bed early. However, it didn't matter because I had to be to work early that day for a meeting at work. So once again, didn't get any sleep. So I was showing my wife yesterday that Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, all those days were under 6 hours of sleep. Now, for some of you, be like, "Oh, I never get any more than 4 hours." But for me, I need like 6.5 to 7 hours of sleep in order to like feel right. And we're running on almost a whole week of like 5.5. It's not cutting it. So I finally get good sleep on Wednesday. Even though it wasn't a lot of sleep, I got good sleep on Wednesday. Get home Thursday morning, and I'm very tired. Like, I'm very tired. And and it's raining outside. So I decide I'm going to do 1.5 miles. So I crank out 1.5 miles. And that's been pretty much my whole week. It's been a real low mileage week, but I think that's good because my plan right now is to actually attempt a 10-mile long run on Saturday. We'll see, depending on how I feel. But overall, the reduction in mileage and pace has worked. I am feeling a lot better in terms of like my legs. My right leg is still kind of tight. And during my 1.5 mile run yesterday, I could definitely feel like things were still there. But overall for week 17, kind of a low mileage week, a low intensity week. I was happy to do the 3.1 miles at 8:47. I kind of paid for that because I definitely was feeling that the night of, but it's sort of like pain management and recovery is weird because you never really know if you're back. You know what I mean? Like you never know do I feel good or am I just lying to myself? And each run you do afterwards, you're like, oh, did I overdo it? It's this weird, and that's where I'm at right now. Is like I'm in this weird place where I feel like I could go, but then I'm like, should I? Is it a good idea? Am I going to hurt myself? So I'm in that weird place right now. I'll probably do 1 mile today, and then I'm going to shoot for 10, but back off if I can't hit it. I'll probably shoot for 10 on Saturday. And that's pretty much week 17 marathon training. I will say that I'm also in a weird place with my training block because I'm getting close to taper time, but I'm also in this weird spot where I'd like to know how I'm doing. Like, where am I really at? It's kind of like, and I'm not going to know. Like, I'm not going to get a chance to know because I've promised myself for this training block, I'm not going to go too hard before the actual race. So yeah, that pretty much covers what's going on with marathon training. And now I want to shift to the news and get into my uncredible take on what's been going on in the news. So the big story this past week was this White House Correspondence dinner that was apparently held in a Hilton hotel or some kind of a hotel. And, I wrote in my notes that I wanted to talk about the assassination attempt, and maybe the more I think about it, the more I'm like, I'm not sure that's entirely what was going on. I mean, I guess they have some documentation that he was trying to. I didn't read anything about this. All I've heard is the conversation around the Secret Service, whether or not they failed. There's obviously the conspiracy theory, which, about whether or not this was set up. There's some confusion as to why it continued. A lot of strange commentary on people's reaction. And I think if nothing else, you definitely have a perfect illustration of how different personalities handle different types of situations, like how people handle intense situations. Like you have Dana White, who was just like, this is awesome. And you have people who are just stunned. You have people running out crying. One of the fun conversations is how some people, like some men, were rushing off and leaving their wives behind. So there's a lot of like fun conversations there too. And it's hard watching some of the videos from inside. Like, what happened outside of the White House Correspondence dinner was pretty scary, and it was close to becoming something else, I guess. But it's not, as far as I'm aware, it's not like shots were fired inside that where they were. And maybe I'm misreading that whole thing, but it looks like he barely made it past security. It's like he tried to bum rush through them and he didn't try to sneak by. He just like full sprinted, I guess. But again, I didn't follow the whole story. I've just seen clips and some commentary on the whole thing. And when I was watching the camera angles from the stage, the platform where Trump and JD Vance were pulled, man, you can barely hear the shots. Like, it didn't seem like people were really aware of what was going on. Now, I'm sure outside where, like, I'm not sure what it looked like, but like in those videos, you kind of hear it in the background. And then it's almost like somebody radioed shots fired. And then it's sort of like the Secret Service ran in, pulled people around, sent them off, whatever. Maybe it was different live, but the feel I got from like where they were on stage and those camera angles, the camera doesn't seem to pick up the shots at all. And so obviously there's all kinds of commentary about, was this set up? Was it real? Then there's conversations about whether or not the Secret Service did their job. Why are people saying they did a good job when this guy was able to, I guess he had a lot of weapons in his room, and he had just checked in that Friday, and a whole bunch of like suspicious stuff going on there. But again, as I've said in the past, my goal with this segment is not to talk about the obvious things, because there's all kinds of commentators on that. I want to give my uncredible take. And my first take is the news cycle got washed again. And it seems like a distraction from the Iran war, or the Iran, what do we call it? Because we talked about last week how the word war is being misused. Because technically this isn't a war from America's side. But it just seems like that the goal might have been to get that out of the news cycle. But one thing's for sure is this took over the news cycle for a little bit. It's not going to hold up. I noticed that we're going right back to the Hormuz Strait, what's going on in Iran, and whether or not we're going to get a deal. That's already happening. But it did serve that purpose of washing the news cycle yet again. By the way, barely anyone, if anyone at all, is talking about Epstein files now, right? So there's that. But then the other thing that had me scratching my head, and there's this controversy over an interview that Donald Trump did with, I don't know, 60 Minutes maybe, who knows. I don't pay attention that closely. I just hear the news story, and then I don't do any research. I just come here. That's what makes this Uncredible. But just as a regular guy hearing these stories and listening to some podcasts, one of the things that was weird to me, and it's funny because it's just now struck me when this has been going on for my whole life, I think. Maybe not, man. I'm trying to think back to when the first time I heard the word. But this interview that was done with 60 Minutes, the lady references this guy's manifesto. And I'm like, manifesto is just like, isn't that one of those words that's like, does anyone really know what that means? Now, when I was in college, Francis Schaeffer had a book called A Christian Manifesto. And I'll tell you what my first thought was. Now, it's a decent book. It's hard to read. I'm honestly not even sure I could remember much of the content of it. I know it was a decent book to read. Interesting book anyway. I don't remember the point of it, though, if I'm being completely honest. I remember liking it, thinking it was a decent book at the time. But when I listened to, we'll say 3 podcasts. After the third podcast, I heard them reference this guy's manifesto. The thought that went through my head was, if you have a manifesto, that can't be good. Who has a manifesto? Like, and maybe the media, it's got to be this, right? The media takes this guy's stated writings or things he wrote down and they label it a manifesto. Like, nobody, like who, I wish I had something close by. Who is like, this will work. It's time for props. Who takes out a notebook and goes, here is my manifesto? Do people do that? Is that a thing? Let me say this. If you have a book or journal at home that you have written on the front, this is my manifesto, that's something. That's something, right? Because you don't ever hear about like you don't hear in the news of well-to-do people, intelligent people, benevolent people, and referencing their manifesto. You know what I'm saying? Like it goes back to that when we were talking about the word regime a couple episodes ago, where, I mean, technically any group or any government leadership like that's in place or in power could be called a regime, but the media only uses the term when there's negative connotations. And it's the same thing with this. They're like, oh, in this guy's manifesto, he says this. Did he put in his journal that this is my manifesto? Is that a thing people have? Like, it almost strikes me as, and I was trying to think of this because it's been a long time, that Francis Schaeffer's A Christian Manifesto is the only book I've ever read that had that. And I was trying to remember if there was any assignment that told us to do our own. And I don't think there was. That was very early in my collegiate career, and it was sort of like an introduction class, so it wouldn't have been that deep in terms of like, here's his manifesto, what would you write? Like, I could see that being a college level assignment. But man, if you have a manifesto, that can't be good, right? And I just don't, but what it makes me wonder is if when the media uses that term, manifesto, it makes me wonder if they're just trying to make the person seem more extreme with that word, or maybe their extreme views that are in this writing are perceived by them as falling under the category of a manifesto. It's when I look up the word manifesto, it's really just like your stated beliefs. And so I guess in a way we all have them, whether we wrote them down or not. But even that's a weird thing to do, right? Like, coming from a church background, there are doctrinal statements. There's the London Baptist Confession of Faith, Westminster Confession of Faith. I'm sure other churches have like faith statement documents. Would that qualify? I mean, probably would if they wanted it to, as a manifesto. It's just very weird. Like, that word manifesto struck me this week as being such a strange term that it's sort of like it has this ominous feel to it, and you hear it over and over, and it's not a word, regime, manifesto. Whenever I hear the media using terms that nobody uses in everyday life, I sort of scratch my head and I go, what is their intention? Are they trying to sound smart? Are they trying to make the other person sound crazy or evil or bad? The choice of words, and you know what it is? What strikes me about it is the prevalence with which these words get used. It's when you hear a word like regime used across multiple platforms, but never in everyday life, there's something going on there, right? Like, there's some sort of thing going on there. Same with this word manifesto. It's like there's a school shooting, or in this case, this guy charged the White House Correspondence dinner, and we're going to refer to his writings as a manifesto. Maybe he referred to them in that way, and that's why they're doing it. But just seeing that word used across multiple platforms just makes you wonder what's going on there. Because if it was just his stated beliefs, why not just say he wrote this down in his journal? These are his stated beliefs, or this is what he wrote in a note that told us why he was doing this. But what they say is what they found in his manifesto. That just sounds crazy, right? Doesn't it? Like immediately it carries with it that feeling of like insanity or crazy or fringe. It has all those connotations, and it just makes me wonder, like, the use of words, particularly in media. And not just like, if someone was smart and looked at this guy's writings and said, that's kind of like a manifesto, and then when they got on the media and commentary, they used the term, you'd go, okay, that's just in his vocabulary. But when all the news media outlets or podcasts, what's weird is it's happening. I listen to podcasts. I don't listen to like mainstream media, and it's coming out of there too. So it's like, one of the things about the podcast world, or at least the perception, is that these aren't controlled. these are people, these aren't like advertised controlled media. Like they're different than the mainstream media. And yet all of them are using these terms. Now, is that because they're trying to appear legitimate in their role as a podcaster and when they're reporting the news? It's weird, right? Because the podcast scene, if you will, loves to point out the fact that they're the new media and mocking the failed, legacy media, Fox, CNN, MSNBC. They love to mock that. They love to be like, we're over here and you're over here. But then they start doing things like where they use words like regime or manifesto. And it's like, it sounds like you are trying to sound like them, but you don't want to be like them. And so then it makes me wonder, is it probable that the podcast world is slowly shifting? And what does that mean, right? As somebody who doesn't have a sponsor, I get here on my basement when I have time, I have no obligation to use words like manifesto. Like, why would you call it that? Who talks like that? I don't know. It's interesting to me. It's an uncredible take. So from all this stuff that's been going on, shocking. If it's true, seems true. I don't know. It's, when I was watching the video of this go down from inside the White House Correspondence dinner thing, it was weird, man. It was weird. And obviously conspiracy theory might say that this was all staged. The wildest one I've heard is that it was just a goal to push the ballroom so that it's a more secure place to hold dinners like this. And like, it's not far-fetched, and but it's like, it can go both ways, right? If something like this happens while you're trying to get your ballroom built, you can spin that event that happened in a positive way to promote your thing. That would be reasonable. At the same time, you could stage something like this and pitch your ballroom. And knowing our government and its history and some of the things that it's been involved with, I'm like, it's not that far-fetched. It's not outside the realm of possibility. So, who knows? But yeah, they're calling it an assassination attempt. It could have been, this, I don't know the blueprint of where this took place. Like, I don't know which direction he was running or towards. There's probably a map. There's probably some people who deep dive this whole thing, but it didn't seem like it was like the actual execution on the back end was well thought out. It looked like it was going to be like a bum rush into the event and just start shooting versus like, when I think of an assassination attempt, I think of something like you look at JFK, for example, where somebody waited for the car to slow down and pick the right spot and know where they're going to hit him. It's very targeted. This seemed a little bit more like a broad plan to shoot people that I don't like. And one of them happens to be the president, who I also don't like. And it wasn't as strategic as you would think. So I'm not sure how that, calling it an assassination attempt, I guess it is. I guess, sure. But it just sort of seemed like somebody who was slightly disturbed running in there and trying to just shoot a bunch of people. So, it's bad no matter what. No matter how you look at it. But yeah, my takeaway was, what's with this word manifesto? So let me know in the comments. Do you have a manifesto? I'd love to read it. All right, now let's switch over to our main topic, and we're going to look at the world through an uncredible lens. And I actually wasn't really sure what I was going to talk about for the main topic this week until this morning. And what I came up with, something that I'm very interested in this year particularly, and it's the first time for me that I'm ahead of the game on this situation. But starting this week, the Cocodona 250, I wrote it wrong in my notes. The Cocodona 250 I think it starts Monday. I guess I have it right in front of me. I don't really. I guess it starts Monday, and I'm really excited about this. So I've been following a lot of racers, despite the fact that I don't do any trail running or ultra running. The fact that I do a lot of running posting and running content, I guess, it just sort of forces me into this pipeline of not only marathon runners, but ultra marathon runners. And I follow a lot of people who are into the ultra scene. And this year's got a lot. If I'm reading this right, there's a lot of really exciting people who are going to be running this race. The ones that stand out to me are Courtney Dauwalter, who I don't know that much about her, but I know she's an absolute savage in terms of ultra running. And my story about her, I had no idea who she was or anything. And last year I was doing a really long run. I was trying to do my longest run. I think at the time it might have been my longest run ever. And it was one of my attempts at this run. That didn't go well, by the way. But I was trying to find an episode of Joe Rogan, because Rogan's podcast runs like 2 hours and 30 to 3 hours long, and 2 hours and 30 minutes to 3 hours long is what I was trying to say. And it's a slower pace in terms of like something to listen to. One thing I've noticed that when I do longer runs, if I start out with music, there's no way for me to slow down my pace. So I was looking for an episode to listen to, and I remember, not sure how I got into this particular episode, but I remember hearing about the episode about Courtney Dauwalter, and I thought, I'm going to look that one up, because the story behind it, or maybe it was a clip on Instagram or something I saw that said that she won by 10 hours, and I'm like, she won by 10 hours? What are we talking about here? So I dialed up her episode with Joe Rogan, and I ran a long run and listened to that episode. And the reason I remember that episode is not because it was awesome or spectacular in any way, shape, or form, but because my run went horribly wrong. And I was listening to him talk to her about her ultra, where she, I don't even know what it was, Moab, maybe it was Moab 240, where she won by 2 hours, by 10 hours. And I was running, it was supposed to be a perfect day for running, and I think it ended up being like 80, 90 degrees, sun beating down, no shade, just got beat up in this in this run. And I remember having to fold because I couldn't finish the run, but I did finish her episode, and her episode ended, and I was like, I'm literally cooked. Like, I was burning up. But yeah, so because I listened to that episode while I had a really bad experience, I just didn't forget, followed her, and then continued to kind of went from her to Cameron Haynes. And I'm not sure if I came across Cam. I think what happened was I listened to that episode, and at the time, my daughter and I were walking to the library, and my daughter would go look for books for herself, and while she did that, I would go look for books for myself. And I came across Cam Haynes' book called Endure, I think, with Joe Rogan as the wrote the introduction or something like that. I wrote the foreword, and I was like, here's a book I could read. So I checked the book out. I read the whole book. And in that book, I think he talks about Courtney Dauwalter in that book as well. And then it came up again when I listened to the audiobook of his new book called Undeniable. She's in that as well. He references her there. And so I started following Cam, and they do a lot of stuff together in terms of the running scene as well. So that's kind of how I got connected to that. And she's running this race, and I guess she fell out last year at like 70 miles. I don't know the whole story on that, but I just found on YouTube, I don't know how old it is, but I just found a video on YouTube of last year's Cocodona where it's called The Year of the Storm. I think that's the actual name of the YouTube video. And I'm going to look that up and watch it. And I think her story might be referenced in there. Maybe, maybe not. But anyway, I'm excited for that. Cam Haynes is supposed to be running it. Last year's, they call him the Triple Crown winner, Killian Korth, who I've been following. I think when he won, so I think what happened with him, the way I found him was He won, I want to say Bigfoot last year, and Goggins was in that race, I think, if I'm remembering if I'm remembering correctly. But regardless, Killian won that, added him on Instagram, and then found out that he had a Substack. So I followed his Substack. And by the way, I mentioned this last week, not a lot of runners that are posting on Instagram and Substack. And those are the two places where I'm posting most of my stuff. I would love to have more running, people to follow on Substack. I would love to be building. I've been looking for them. I found the Yellow Runner over there. I referenced them. Her podcast a couple weeks ago. Killian Korth is on there. But yeah, so I'm excited for Killian. He definitely won a bunch of these types of races last year. And then from what I can tell, it looks like Goggins might be running this as well. So those are the 4 names that I'm going to be following. But those stories, as exciting as they're going to be, are going to be told. You don't need me to tell them. And that's the whole point of this podcast. I like to give you a different take, a different look. And so out of sheer curiosity. Now, keep in mind, this comes off of last week. I launched an article on the Substack called I'm Not Chasing Boston. And I'll be honest, because I keep bumping into these ultra runners and the ultra scene, and I love to watch the ultra documentaries. Even my daughter's into it a little bit. She might just be into it because I am. I'm not sure. That time will tell. But she, out of curiosity, I said I wasn't going to run the Boston Marathon because it's run on a Monday. It's not something that's exciting to me. The ultra scene, because I'm seeing all these social media posts, I'm kind of like, I could see me doing an ultra. Maybe. We'll see how this year goes and then maybe look at one next year. Maybe. And I was like, I wonder if I'll ever run Cocodona. And I was like, so I pull it up and I'll never run Cocodona either. Right? But I'll tell you why. Because listen to this. So I look it up and I'm like, what would it take to run Cocodona 250? The Cocodona 250 for this year, if you were to do early registration, the cost of the race, like the entry race fee, $16.95 plus tax, six and a quarter tax, I think. Like, yo. Basically, like, you're talking $2,000 just to be in the race. That's not travel expenses. Maybe it is. I don't know. I didn't read too closely. There was a lot more involved with the registration. Maybe I didn't look closely enough. Someone's going to be like, you idiot, it does include travel. But like, I don't think they're having me travel, paying me to travel there. So you're looking at like, just to get there, not to mention the kind of gear that you would have to, most of these people have teams at different locations and the race. I can't even conceive of what it would take to run one of these races. I just can't even conceive of it. It's just such another level of thing. It's such a community. By the way, I mentioned earlier, I'm not a huge fan of group projects. This is like a huge group project, where one guy, the runner, is doing a lot of the work and the other people are just kind of supporting him. In this case, it's kind of a good thing. It's a good teamwork thing. But again, I like to do things alone. Like this would be, the coordination involved is just insane. But yeah, I was looking at the prices. So if you wanted to get ahead of the game, you would have had to, by August 31st in 2025, you could have gotten it for the low price of $1,700. And good news for anybody who's still interested, you can still sign up. I think it says walk-up registration, $1845. So still right around $2,000 if you want to just walk up to the Cocodona 250 and run it, which is just crazy. But like, it's exciting. It's kind of like the Boston Marathon. It's like, that would be fun to do. But here's another reason why average, uncredible people won't do it. Because the cost is insane. Now, around here, there's the closest ultra that I know of is like Oil Creek, I think it is. I think Oil Creek. And I've thought about doing that one. And then there was a road ultra, which I would be interested in. And I'll tell you why. The one that I was looking at, I think it was in Maryland. It's one of the states that I want to get for my Uncredible chasing minor races type thing. It's one of those states, and it starts at like 10:30, I think, at night, and it goes all night. It goes from like 10:30 at night to 7:30 in the morning. And I really thought that would be a fun race to participate in, being a night shifter. I feel like I would have an incredible advantage in terms of just the fact that it's overnight. That's when I do what I do. So one of the things I've thought about, by the way, with my training as a night shifter, I never train when I'm rested. I always train after a whole night of work. And I read a lot of people who train before they go to work. I don't know how you do that. I really just don't. Maybe if I was on day shift. I saw an Instagram video earlier this week where a lady was getting up at 3:30 in the morning to go on her run before work. And I'm like, man, it's no different, I guess. It's before or after, but the mental, I don't know, guys like Rogan and The Rock, they always say that it gets their day started and it resets them. So I don't know. I've never tried it. I get up for work and I go to work. Like I don't do anything else. I shower, go to work. Like I shower, eat a little bit, and I head just straight to work. I don't do a whole lot before work. I don't like doing that. So, but yeah, my main topic and looking at the world through an Uncredible lens, I'm excited about Cocodona 250. This year specifically, I'm starting to get to know some of the players in the game. And it's interesting to me now, and knowing that some of the people that I've followed and who've been an inspiration to me doing what I'm doing, it's going to be exciting to see a lot of them in this race, and I'll be tracking them, and I'm ahead of it. I'm not looking back going, oh, I never even heard of that race. So, yeah. And by the way, I should mention Cam Hanes just ran, I think he said he's 58 and he ran like a 2:39 marathon in Eugene. Like gives me hope. Gives me hope because at starting running in my 40s, it gives me hope that by the time I'm 58, maybe I can get a sub 3 hour marathon. I doubt that'll ever happen, but it gives me hope that it's possible. So yeah, pay attention to the Cocodona 250. I know nothing about tracking it, and if you want to run it, you can run it. You can walk up, apparently. You can do a walk-up registration for $2,000. It's crazy, man. All right, now let's get into our podcast feature. And this is kind of a follow-up to last week's podcast feature. I was listening to Megan Menser's, can't remember the name of the podcast now. Total brain fart. But last week's podcast had Mike Runs Marathons, that's his tag on Instagram, on her show, and he has a podcast called At Your Own Pace. And I've only been able to listen to one episode, but it was a great episode. I mean, it was enough to get me to come back later and check out some of his other episodes. But the podcast, again, is called At Your Own Pace. As always, I'm going to link everything in the show notes. I try to make the links clickable. It all looks clickable when I publish. And then, a couple days later, I'll jump in there and I'll check it, and it won't, like one will be clickable and the other two won't be, or something like that. I don't understand what's going on there. So maybe I'm not tech savvy enough to do it the right way, but I'll try to link so that you can click it, everybody in the show notes. But yeah, Mike Runs Marathons was on Megan Menser's The Reckless Optimist, and I shared that last week, and he referenced his podcast At Your Own Pace, and so I listened to that this past week. I listened to his episode 15 with Christi, who her tag, what's the word? What do you call the thing? The username, but username's not the word. But the name that they're using in social media is @thisblonderuns with some underscores. Again, I'll link it. But she says she has over 40 marathons under her belt, and she shares her story of going from kind of like not really interested to being peer pressured into it to now she's multi-time marathon runner. And really great conversation. It's hard to really sum up the episode without, like, they span a lot of things. Like, they talk a lot about, I think she's written 2 children's books. They talk about her entry into it. There's a lot of coaching stuff because she's a coach. A lot of great information there. She talks about running with her husband. So you've got some really great, like, if you're the runner in your relationship, it's some relationship conversation there too. So it's like, the episode kind of ran the gamut in terms of like what you hear, which is what made it a really good episode. Like you jumped from topic to topic and got some very interesting perspectives on a lot of different things. So that's cool. What stood out to me was, and she had a lot of really good coaching tips. And this is one that I've experienced. And then when you hear something like this from somebody who has done it as much as she has and who is a coach and is by all accounts a professional, it kind of like resonates because you're like, oh, that's exactly how I feel in these circumstances. And you're just kind of telling me what I've already experienced and you're validating that sense. And so the thing that stood out to me about this episode was when they talked about, I call it tiered goals, but having more than one goal when you go into a race that you can pivot to. And she does a great job of explaining this, but what she explains is if you don't have these like goals that you can pivot to, it makes it very more likely that you're going to quit, that you're going to DNF. And I've felt this live in my first marathon where I wasn't even, like, I could tell my body wasn't going to hold up. And I had to pivot and pivot and pivot. Having experienced it, like I didn't go into the race with this idea. The pivoting occurred during the race. And I love the idea of sort of knowing what those pivots are going to be in general before you go to the race. And so she talks a lot about that and how, like, you can have multiple goals. Like, I want to hit this pace, or, you know, I want to run the whole thing without stopping, or I want to make sure I get my fueling right, or whatever. You can have those like really high goals for yourself. But when those become obviously and objectively unachievable for whatever reason, it could be, you know, let's say your goal was to fuel properly throughout the whole race and 8 miles in you throw up. That, I mean, okay, like that's out the window. So then what? If you don't have other goals in mind, then you're going to give up because you failed right there at mile 8. And that sense of failure is going to say, well, I can quit. And I definitely experience this when I'm doing my training runs because, like, I've been on training runs where I set a goal to run 20 miles, right? This happened a lot to me last year when I was trying to chase a 20-mile run. And I would get to mile 16 and I would be walking. And, you know, your goal might have been to run 20 miles at an 11-minute pace, whatever, 12-minute pace. Just want to run the whole thing. And at mile 16, you can't run anymore because your hamstring's tight or your quads, you know, tightening up on you, or your shin splints are the impact from the road is killing your shins, whatever it is. For me, when I got to mile 16 and my goal was to run 20, I walked up to 18. And then in my head, I kept telling myself, this isn't running. What you're doing right now is proving nothing. Now, in a training run, hope that doesn't come through the audio. Just smash the... in a training run, you sort of, a lot of times you say, this isn't worth what I'm putting into it. This isn't the race. But what I noticed in some of my races is I've also had that thought where you're in the race that you trained for and it's like, I want to push. And then you go, but what if you get injured and you can't go to work tomorrow? It's like your body and your mind try to convince you that pushing a little further isn't worth it. And I remember specifically in this one 20-mile attempt where at mile 16 I was walking, the sun was beating down on me. I was only like a mile and a half or 2 miles away from home. Called my son to pick me up, and the second we got home, I was like, I didn't have that far to go. But I had already been walking for like 2 miles, and it just felt so defeated because I was like, that's not running. In my head, I was like, you're not even running. You're just walking at this point. So like having these tiered goals is so important so that you don't quit. And I wanted to share, because I have the Buffalo Marathon coming up in, I guess it's, 3 weeks and 3 days. So in 3 weeks, Buffalo Marathon. And I wanted to give an example of like what these tiered goals might look like. And so like my A goal for the Buffalo Marathon is to have a 3:55. I want a sub 4-hour marathon. That's my goal. And I set a goal of a sub 2-hour half marathon. And that was my Winter Warrior in January. And I hit 1:59. So my goal was 1:50. And I just barely got below sub 2, but I didn't quit because it wasn't anywhere near the 1:50. I just kept going because sub 2 was on the table. So my goal, my primary time goal, what you might call my A goal for the Buffalo Marathon is a 3:55. A B goal might be 4 hours and 10 minutes. And a C goal might be 4 hours and 30 minutes. And again, like, the reason you think about these goals before the race is because when you look at your watch at mile 15 and a 3:55 is just out of the question, like, like maybe I'm running 9:30s for the first 13 miles so that I hold back. And by mile 13, I'm like, I'm cooked. There's nothing left. I might be able to hold that 9:30 pace, but I know in my head that I can't go 8:30 and make up the time that I lost. So there's going to be that moment where I have to decide if I even can physically push for this particular goal. If I can't, my options can be, well, I missed my goal, I quit, or let's go for 4:10. I'm not going to hit sub 4, but let's go for 4:10. And then, as you get, let's say you get to mile 20. 4:10's gone. 4:30 still on the table. Keep pushing. Now, for me personally, all of those goals are massive PRs. And I have to keep reminding myself that as I go into this race, because as with anybody, I'm always chasing the next goal. But I always have to remind myself that back in September, when I ran my first marathon, it was 5 hours and 2 minutes. 5 hours and 2 minutes. And right now, I'm trying to shave over an hour off that time in September, October, November, December, January, February, March, April, May. In 9 months, I'm trying to shave an hour off my marathon time. Is it possible? Guess we're going to find out. But is it likely? Probably not. Not for a novice like me, somebody who's just kind of winging it. Probably not probable. But if I'm 13 miles in and I don't have a 3:55, I don't want to be defeated, because I'm still if I'm that far in, I still have the hope of being like 50 minutes faster than my first marathon. And even if it ends up being a 4:30 or 4:40 or 4:50, something goes terribly wrong, I still have never had a sub 5 hour marathon. So anything sub 5, as those tiers begin to break down, I'm still chasing that personal record. And then at the very, very end of the road, and she talks about this in her episode too, at the very end of the road, just finish. Because the ultimate goal is to just finish. So even if I see 5:02 pass by and it's a mile to go, we don't quit. We keep going, because if I finish, I have 2 marathons I've completed, not just one. And so having those A, B, C, D, E, F, G goals and thinking through those scenarios allows you to not have moments of just complete breakdown in the race mentally. Physical breakdown you can only prepare for with your training, but mental breakdown, it's very easy to having missed like half a dozen tiered goals to go, you know what? I don't know what I'm doing this with, like, to my body for. I don't know why I'm doing it. And then you're done and you walk away and you DNF. And I'm sure I've listened to a lot of racers and runners. I'm sure nobody DNFs and is like, yeah, that was the right call. Unless there's like some major health issue involved. But like, I think a lot of people who do this type of racing, you put all this work into it, look at that DNF. Like, in the moment, it probably feels right. Like, I need to quit. I can't go any further. But I feel like the common thread when I've heard of people talk about DNFs is like the second I pulled from the race, I regretted it. Like the moment, or maybe 20 minutes later, like the second I got hydrated or the second I got that calf stretched, whatever it is, like they regret it. And so I don't think anybody really wants to DNF. So having those tiered goals is so important for that. And, you know, when you look at, for me to tell you that, as somebody who's only ran one marathon, and it was, by all accounts, a slow marathon, 5 hours, 2 minutes, nothing impressive. However, when you hear it from somebody who's run 40 marathons, like Christi, that's like, you listen to this podcast and you go, I'm on the right track. My thinking makes sense. Like, it's valid and it's appropriate. And this is coming from not some uncredible guy who woke up one day and then a year later decided to run his first marathon. This is somebody who's been running marathons for a long time, saying similar things. And I would just encourage you to go check out Mike's podcast. I'm sure based on this episode alone that the other content is worth your time. I'm going to try to jump in. That one of the challenges I'm having now is the more podcasts I find, the more distance I get from the last one I featured. And it's hard to keep track of all of the content. I can't listen to all these podcasts. There's also podcasts that I just like to listen to, that I want to listen to. And there's only so much time in a day. So I did notice that I found myself drawn to some of the podcasts I featured in my early episodes. And I was like, man, I need to go back to those and check them out. So I might be doing like a re-feature at some point. I think I'm getting a little bit better at sharing the content on social media too. So that's going to be coming down the road. But I would highly encourage you, check out Mike Runs Marathons. Episode 15 is the one that I listened to. Great episode. Follow both of them on social media. This Blonde Runs, and I guess what's weird is I didn't get a last name. It just says Christi. So Christi, This Blonde Runs. Check her out on Instagram and all the socials. And Mike Runs Marathons. I like his name. I like that handle. Handle? Is that the word? I don't know if I found the word right there. But yeah, I like that handle. But yeah, check out the At Your Own Pace podcast. The video was on YouTube. The audio was on Spotify, best as I could tell. Unless my connection was bad, and that's why I didn't get the video on Spotify. Not sure on that one. But he's got links for both. So check him out. Great podcast, great information. Let's go ahead and close things out with our quote of the week. And it's actually today's quote for this week. The quote is, I nailed this. By the way, I nailed this last week. The quote of the week is, if it doesn't challenge you, it doesn't change you. If it doesn't challenge you, it doesn't change you. And that is such a great quote. And I think it really hits home. As I've been going through some of these challenges with my right leg, it occurred to me when I saw this quote literally today, because I went through the whole week of quotes and I was like, oh, well, today's quote's perfect. This past week the past 3 weeks has been really challenging in terms of pain management, making the right decisions for my body to stay healthy so that I can run my marathon in 3 weeks and do that strong, not limping. This quote kind of sums it up. Like, sometimes, this is going to make sense to a lot of people, but sometimes running is easy, like mentally. Sometimes that's the easiest thing I can do because it allows me to get away from the things that I normally think about, the struggles of the world. It allows me to throw my earbuds in and just kind of zone out and work through some of the challenges in life. And I was thinking about these last couple of weeks where I've had to slow my running down in order to get stronger. It's been so counterintuitive, but as I've been disciplined with that process, seeing the healing come slowly made me remember that getting to this point has also taken time. And you have to spend a lot of time to get where you're going, and your body also needs that same preference when it's trying to heal. And it's very difficult for me because like I said, it's easy for me to go and run. It's easy for me to keep my routine. In a way, it's difficult to dial that back. And I think I mentioned this like 2 episodes ago, that maybe it was 3 episodes ago, but one of the reasons why people who are uncredible don't just quit for a couple of weeks is because if they do that, there's this internal fear that they'll quit forever and they'll never go back to it and it'll all be over. And starting that back up again, or the idea of looking back at a year gone by where no progress was made in a particular area, is just, even cracking the door open to that is terrifying. And so the easiest thing to do, even though it's physically difficult, sometimes emotionally and mentally, it's actually easier to turn the brain off and push through and to go do something. To have to sit in it and not have that physical outlet can sometimes be very difficult for somebody who runs or does anything really on a routine basis, whether it be lifting, running, could be anything, whatever your hobby is, you turn that off and then there's nothing, right? There's nothing in that space and you have to fill it. And, sometimes you fill it with things that aren't healthy, but sometimes you fill it with things that are. And I've really been appreciating the way in which I've been able to recover from this pain and this soreness in my right side without killing the routine. And so what I was worried about was I was worried that simply slowing down and reducing mileage wouldn't be enough. I'm sure that has slowed the process. I'm sure if I had just taken a week and a half off and iced and did some stretching, I probably would have been right back at running. So I don't know. There's no way to know. But mentally and emotionally, being able to just back the mileage off allowed me to slowly heal and experience how my body, like, I've been very aware of how it's changing over these last 3 weeks, because I've been worried that if I don't give it enough time, I'm going to hurt myself more. And having this happen a couple of weeks before the marathon, it's very like hit or miss. Like, am I doing the right thing? Should I back it off even more? But if I back it off too much, is that going to screw up the marathon in other ways? So what's been really strange is the days where I felt good and I got pain in places that I didn't have before. That's been strange. And whether that's your body's adjusting as you run, you're not even aware of it, and so you're using other muscles, I don't know. All I know is it's taken longer than I thought to get to a place where I can run without pain. But at the same time, it's been gradual enough to where I can tell it's working. You know what I mean? Like sometimes you do something, like a doctor tells you to do something and you do it for like a month and there's no change. And you're like, I don't think this is working. And unfortunately, with the race this close, I didn't have like 6 weeks to figure this out. Like, I really needed to see some progress. And I'm thankful that I'm seeing that progress. But again, if it doesn't challenge you, it doesn't change you. And I really think that I've gotten a whole new perspective on rest and recovery. And that perspective change has been slow down and step back, but don't quit. And it's been good to know that adjustment is okay, that you will heal up and it will be good for you and you'll be back to where you were. It might take time, but you can keep doing the things that you're doing. You just got to slow it down. Now, luckily for me, I don't have any injury that would completely bar me from running. It's not like a real injury in that sense, but it's been good to know that there is a way that can work to do that. And as hard as it's been to dial back the mileage and the pace for the last couple of weeks, if it didn't challenge me, it wouldn't change me. And now I can look at when I have soreness and make that decision. Should I push through or should I dial it back and get healed up so that I can be stronger later? And it just adds that to my tool belt of things that I can do. So yeah, that's pretty much it for this week. We're going to go ahead and close things out. As always, thanks for listening to the podcast. If you're listening on YouTube or Spotify, be sure to follow, like, subscribe, do all the things. If you're a Substack person, go to uncredible.me. The links are all in the show notes. If you want the direct Substack link, it's substack.com/Jeremy Lundmark. The reason I don't use that in the podcast is because it's a little bit clunky to type that all out, figure out how to spell my name. That's not the point. So I created the link uncredible.me so you can get to the Substack. As always, if you want all the content sent to your email, subscribe to the Substack. That's the easiest way to get it all. That would be Wednesday's new article, Thursday's throwback article, as long as I have articles to throw back to, and then Saturday's podcast. So Uncredible Podcast. So check those things out. Subscribe to Substack, subscribe to YouTube, subscribe to Spotify. Uncredible merch. You know what I almost did today and I thought it would be too tacky? Is I almost wore the Uncredible hat, and then it occurred to me I was also wearing the Uncredible shirt. And I was like, let's not, that's going to be like Uncredible merch, Uncredible sticker, Uncredible, like that's a bit too much. So maybe next week we'll use the Uncredible hat if we go for another episode with the hat. But to get the merch, there are all kinds of designs. Technically it's on redbubble.com, but the quick link is merch.uncredible.me. That's merch.uncredible.me. And basically what it is a whole bunch of designs that I had created through AI. Touched them up a little bit, put them on Redbubble, and then those designs can go on shirts. And as I've said in the past, the clothing specifically it's pretty quality clothing. So when you get on there and you see the prices of some of the t-shirts and stuff, it's kind of like, I don't know. And so far I've ordered, I think I'm up to, I think I'm up to like 6 shirts if I count the sweatshirt. And I would say 4 out of 6 have blown me away. 2 of them are a lower quality shirt, expected them to wear out, and so they're kind of in the state that I would have expected them to be. They're the lower price stuff, so you get lower quality stuff. So you'll have that. So that's kind of like where I'm at, but I think it's a sport tee was high priced, but man, they've held up really good. I'll wear one next week if I remember. I wear them during my runs, and I have 3 of them, and all 3 of them are just like, they're still in pristine condition. I wear them on runs. I wash them. I thought for sure, based on the material plus the way the logo looks on them, it's very vibrant. It looks great, but I thought for sure that the iron-on or whatever they use to make the actual logo, thought for sure it would start to crack by now, and it's not. And I've had not a year, probably 7 or 8 months. I should go back and look so that I can give a clear answer to that. But yeah, check out the merch. I've also purchased a teacup from there. That was okay. I don't think that logo was the greatest for that, but I got that for my wife for Mother's Day, and it came early. So didn't come early. I ordered it early on purpose, and I was going to package it up, but my wife opened it, so she got it early. So there's that. And then we've got stickers. The stickers come out really well too. So that's just an easy way to support the podcast. So check those things out. Follow me on Instagram at Jeremy Lundmark. That's where I post all my runs, some inspirational quotes. All that stuff gets posted on Substack as well if you're in the app with the notes. on Substack. So check all that stuff out. And as always, thanks for watching and for listening. And remember, stay uncredible.